Pledge of Allegiance and to remain standing to remember all those serving across the world. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I have to sit down. My leg goes out. What's wrong with these chairs tonight? I'm sorry, chairs need to be replaced. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for attending the Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting of April 17th, 2019. To my right, we have Robert Anzalone. To my left, Sandra Capiglione, Rich Cottagio, our Secretary, Gail Noble. Over to the far right, we have Jonathan, our planner, Dennis, our engineer, Kelly, our attorney, and Mike is with our telecommunications specialist. And I'm Maria Hunter, your chairperson. And we will be having John Collins, our traffic engineer, showing up a little bit later in the meeting. And Chris, I hope you're having a good time in Florida. First item on the agenda, I'm going to switch. It's actually number 5. I'm going to put that on right now, which is Homeland Towers. Oh yeah, I forgot to do the minutes. But we're going to switch Homeland Towers to be number 1. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of April 3rd? If so, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Oops, let me change that. 3. Abstain. Okay. Done. So Homeland Towers is we're going to discuss and review the view shed requirements for proposed wireless telecommunications facility to include a 110-foot monopole with a 2,584 square foot multi-carrier equipment compound at the base. Said property is located at 11 Abrams Road in Central Valley and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 226, Block 1, Lot 38. Just give me a moment before I let you speak. And just for the record, I'm waiting for it to be published between today and Friday. A notice is going to be published that there's going to be a balloon test on Saturday, April 27th, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 4 p.m., located at 11 Abrams Road. Okay, you're on.
I did kind of sum everything up. Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Liston Xavier, I'm the regional manager of Homeland Towers. As you indicated, when we first went in here on April 3rd, we scheduled the move for April 27th, and then we put the application on the agenda this evening to go over the view shed maps that were submitted after April 3rd, which identify potential or proposed viewpoint locations where we can get photographs from. And the purpose of this meeting is to see questions for what we did, any recommendations for additional viewpoints, or any other comments and questions like this.
Okay, I'm going to just jump over to Mike. Any thoughts or questions or guidance for us board members?
Yeah, thank you. A couple things. I did submit a memo dated April 12th on this.
Microphone? Just someone pass a microphone down, please.
Yep. So HDR, we submitted a memo on Friday, April 12th. We included a copy of the maps, which you had gotten in hard copy. 2 maps that show aerial views of the area. The first scale is at 2 miles, is the outer ring. The second map is a zoom in at 1 mile. There's 25 orange boxes on there that show proposed photo locations based on a desktop model that's done where a 110-foot monopole would and would not be visible from. You see some shadings also. Dark blue would be visibility. A lighter blue would be possible visibility or visibility through tree line. This, of course, can only be confirmed in the field when a balloon is floated. So a notice has gone out, as Chairwoman had noted. and we'll be in the field on the 27th. And as is common, we may identify in the field a few other locations. These are conceptual points. They're going to take on the order of 25 photos. We'll be in touch with their visual consultant, the applicant's visual consultant, Saratoga Associates, who we've worked with before. And we do in our memo suggest some other locations, and those would be along the New York State Thruway, both north and south of the proposed tower site. The number of photos, I think, would be determined in the field by the applicant. But that was really the main visibility, is along the Thruway corridor. And also the Arden House location. It's certainly outside of the 2 miles, but it is noted as an historic resource. So that would be important to at least get a photo from, even though it is quite a distance away. So for tonight, I just wanted to hear, and of course the applicant rep is here tonight, if there's any other thoughts or questions about the balloon test. That will happen on the 27th. I do want to reiterate also, this is not a formal application from Homeland. This is one part of an application. A visual assessment will result after the balloon test, where there'll be before and after photo simulations of what a tower would or could look like for you to be considered. And of course, as per the code, there's many other points that they have to assemble in their application. So you're not under the so-called shot clock, as you've heard from wireless applicants in the past.
Thank you. Any other consultants, thoughts or concerns you want to?
The only other thing, Mike, if it's too windy on Saturday or there's something like that, they automatically go to the next week, is that correct?
Right. The code has the noticing on a weekend day, and there's the so-called weather day, which would be the day after. So if that's Saturday the 27th, if the conditions don't work out, Saratoga Associates will notify the village, notify HDR, and we'll work out an alternate day, which would be that Sunday. If the Sunday doesn't work out either, it will go into Monday. But the balloon will be up basically from 8 hours starting at 7 o'clock for purposes to get photo sims. Cancellations in the springtime in New York and the Hudson Valley are not uncommon. If there's high winds, more than 6 or 8 miles an hour forecasted, 6 miles an hour. Right, so we'll manage that. The noticing is in, and the notice also references the weather day that's required.
Yeah, just on that point, usually, depending on the wind forecast, but usually we try to confirm at noon the day prior. So on Friday by noon, I would send an email or notify you one way or another that there was an option for go or no-go. And it's just, the way the weather works, we usually base that 6 mile per hour cutoff and how the wind is in the morning. Because as the sun beats up the earth, the weather and the wind always increases, or usually increases towards the afternoon. So even if it's a little windy in the afternoon, we can probably still hold the day, so it's a good period of adequate wind in the morning. To try to find a day where the entire day was no wind is never going to happen.
Sure.
As long as we have a good window in the morning of reduced wind, we'll probably call it a go. But like I said, we'll notify you the day before. And just on your other comments there, I have no problem, first of all, working with you that day in the field. I'll be there all day myself. If there's any viewpoints you catch, you can call me, I'll send my guy there.
Great.
Regarding the New York State Thruway, it is obviously where most of the visibility is going to come from, and we will try to capture photos from there, as long as it's safe, obviously. It is a thruway, there are pull-off spots, but, we'll try to pick it where he's, along a straightaway and as safe as possible.
Of course. Right.
Okay.
And the wind this time of year in the springtime, it's a little bit, a little bit of a catch-22. We want to do this when leaf is off leaf season, not in the middle of the summer. Even though the buds are coming out now, the weather's been really nice, this is really an ideal time to do it. This would yield the most visibility of the balloon, even from areas that might be shielded with full foliage at other times of the year.
Yeah, and because of that, even if it is kind of on the cusp, we'll probably call it a go, because for the purposes of actually creating visual renderings, we don't need the balloon itself. Saratoga is able to do that more accurately than with the balloon there, just through computer modeling. So, and because it's going to be up all day, there's obviously going to be points for the balloon to up and give you a pretty accurate view of what the surface is going to be from. So, in order to be sure that we're as deep off as possible, it's on the cut, and it's safe, we may call it a go. Obviously, we're not gonna try to do it.
Of course, yeah, right. So we'll make a decision with that leading up. We'll speak to you that week before the 27th, just to go over your field methods. Always bring spare balloons. If there is wind, they hit a tree, you have something else to put up.
Okay.
But we've dealt with these logistics with Saratoga many times, and they've been excellent, actually, with the visuals.
Okay, I have a couple. Also, on this map here, I think you reversed the 1 and 2 miles. It doesn't, I mean, I understand it, but I don't know if we need it for a formal record, so. That's okay. On the second page, viewpoints, view sheds. Where number 25 is, that's where the golf course is. Just a little north of it. It looks like you're going through, but just want to make sure that the gate, it's called the gatehouse. It's an old stone building there, which is a town property. If you can just make a note of that. If you keep on going, there's Lake Frederick. I don't know if we need to worry about the view shed from there, just so, take a shot, take a picture of it.
And that's obviously the lake to the east there.
Yes.
Yes.
It's outside the radius, but
It's just outside the 1 mile radius. And then if you go to the southwest where the high school is, where the football field is, somewhere near the high school, just so we have an idea what it would look like from the high school, because it is up high. And then where you have number 19, which is in the one parking lot at Woodbury Common, just if you could take a picture from the top floor of the parking deck, just, which would be in the bottom corner, that white little square bit down there. That's just a thought. Anyone else have any thoughts that they want to see any additional view from? Rich, you're good?
I'm good.
Robert?
I was just wondering whether, from the top of Route 6, would that make any sense to take a picture from that?
The
The lookout
The
part?
lookout
the
part?
rest area,
I think.
pull off
Yeah, the pull-off?
Yes.
on that.
Is that 13?
13 is actually, that's Arden House Road, believe it or not.
Is that, oh,
That's Arden House Road, because it goes up higher. So it'd be, yeah, but that would be a good one also, is the Route 6 pull-off.
Yeah, right. So we'll have from Arden House itself, or the tower,
Yeah,
getting up there would be one. That's the historic resource. But the pull-off's a good idea.
yeah,
Route 6 pull-off, yep.
thank you. Sandy, any other? All right. So you good, we're good now with, all right,
Yeah, we'll be in touch through the building department and to Madam Chair also, just to confirm everything's lined up.
perfect. All right,
But I appreciate it, and again, it's hard ahead of time to try to take these things, so, like I said to Mike, anybody, they'll have my cell phone number at the time. If you're driving around and you see a spot, call me, and I'll
okay,
Yeah, and I always share my contact or whoever's going to be in the field with the planning board. So that's
Okay.
great.
thank you for your time, have a good night.
thank you, have a good night. Mike? Thank you,
Thank you very much, and thanks for moving on the agenda. Appreciate it.
not a problem. I wasn't thinking.
No worries. Yeah. Good night.
We tried. Next item on the agenda is Woodbury Common, Michael Kors rebuild, review resolution for a revised site plan special permit in ARB for the demolition and rebuild of the Michael Kors building with expansion into existing service court. Said property is located off of Route 32 within the Woodbury Common Premium Outlet Shopping Center and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps at Section 225, Block 1, Lot 70.2. If I recall correctly, we did review the resolution, but we didn't take action, and we did receive the Orange County Department of Planning response on that Friday, April 5th. So with that all being said, since we read the resolution, the only change in the resolution would be,
take care.
good night, Mike. There was no change in here, right? Page,
Just added the 239 in there.
right, which was on, what page am I looking at? Page 7. Page 7? number 6 was added, that's right. It says Suite 324 shall be vacated prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the proposed building and shall remain vacant until additional GLA is available. That was the extended sentence, and you're okay with that? Okay. Board members, do I have a motion to accept this resolution with that change and added?
I'll make that.
Rich?
Rich.
Sandy, you want a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4 yes. Okay. Next item is Woodbury Common Tenant Storage. This is a public hearing for amended site plan. Amended site plan special permit, ARB review for proposed amendment to the special permit used to allow the utilization of available leasable retail space for tenant storage space. Said property is located off of Route 32 within the Woodbury Common Premium Outlet Shopping Center and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 225, Block 1, Lot 70.2. And for the record, on April 5th, we received a response back from the Orange County Department of Planning. And we didn't get one from the county DPW, and that's okay because it's beyond 30 days. All right. Want to give us a brief overview?
Sure, good evening.
Is it, you know, it's, no, you gotta, it's underneath, you gotta, where the white button, where the white tape is, you have to flip it over, there's a little button underneath.
Pull it out, it's easier to see. A little button on the
See that
bottom.
little teeny tiny button?
Yeah.
And if it's easier for you to hold it, whatever makes it easy.
Good evening, board, board consultants, public. I'm John Villapiano, Vice President Development for Simon Property Group, owner-operator of Woodbury Common Premium Outlets. As discussed with this board on a couple occasions, we're requesting approval to utilize existing and approved leasable area throughout the center as tenant storage space. This proposal does not alter any building footprints, does not alter any or require any building facade changes that would require ARB approval. What we're looking for is a maximum of 15% of our total leasable area would be used as temporary storage or as temporary tenant storage space. The space would be leased to and restricted to use by existing Woodbury Common tenants. The space would, in order to be occupied, needs to meet all applicable building codes and will require building and occupancy permits, as well as updates to the village's 911 map. Access to each of these spaces would be through the rear of the buildings, through the tenant, through service courts. If in fact any of our space does have frontage along the pedestrian promenades, we will be covering the windows and the doorways and any glass with graphics that would be branded with Woodbury Common or Simon advertisements, so customers would not be confusing this space for retail that's open for business and sales. And lastly, as discussed at our prior appearance in front of the board, larger spaces that could be dedicated as tenant storage space, we would request permission that these spaces, assuming all other building codes are met, that we could utilize these spaces for multiple tenants, as we have done before throughout our portfolio. So any other questions, I'll be here either for the board or the public.
Thank you. Dennis, you gave us a report.
Well, I gave you a report last time, basically, and the items that John mentioned were those that were discussed with the building department, essentially. We had posed a number of questions last time in addition to the criteria that Gary and Woodbury Common established. And there were questions of the board that you had some further discussion on. The advertising in the front of the store, that using the Woodbury Common theme, the materials they typically use to show that this is not a store that is now open for retail sales, so people don't try to enter. That was agreed to. A number of things about pedestrian circulation and safety, we talked about that. The one item that we take a little exception to, what John was requesting, was the shared space. I talked to Gary again about that. Gary is of the opinion that the space should be for one tenant only. My recommendation would be, if the Common would like to proceed differently, that for right now, you have a recommendation from Gary. If you agree with that recommendation, you stay with that, and if it works out all well, and they can talk to Gary about it and see how they might arrange shared space, then maybe that's possible. For now, I asked Gary again today, after Woodbury Common asked for a change to the draft resolution, which included that condition, and I asked Gary again, and he said no, he thought it should be for a single space, or a single tenant. But other than that, everything else is in accordance with what we discussed last time, and what the building department has requested. And approval that Woodbury Common has asked for and that we've suggested to you is that they don't have to come back for individual tenants, that this would be something that could be regulated by the building department. If they have another space that becomes available, if they demonstrate they satisfy all the criteria, they haven't exceeded the 15%, Gary can simply say okay to that.
Thank you. Kelly?
So we provided the board with the draft resolution for your consideration tonight, which we can go over after the public hearing. But as part of that resolution, it states that the planning board reaffirms its March 6, 2013 secret finding statement. We think that that is appropriate. There's really no significant adverse environmental impact that's new, that was not studied at that time as part of this application.
Thank you. And I didn't ask anything from the planner because it's status quo there now. Rich, thoughts, concerns? Go to the public.
I'm good.
Go to public, yeah.
John, I'm going to ask you to take a seat. And being that this is a public hearing, notice is hereby given that the Village of Woodbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing at 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday, April 17, 2019, at Woodbury Village Hall, 455 Route 32, Highland Mills, New York, in the matter of the application of Premium Outlet Partners LP for revised site plan, special permit, and ARB to permit the utilization of available leasable retail space for tenant storage space. Said property is located off of Route 32 within the Woodbury Common Premium Outlet Shopping Center, is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 225, Block 1, Lot 70.2. And notice was published on the April 12th paper. Anyone in the second row that would like to speak on this application? Third row, fourth row, along the room, anyone at all that would like to speak on this application? With no one coming forward, what's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 John, you can come back up to the podium, please. Okay, with that being said,
Does he have a copy of the resolution?
I emailed it.
what's that?
He asked
I just
if
asked
he had a copy, and I said I emailed it to Jennifer. We did receive a change, two changes. If you'd like me to go over those.
All right, so board members, do you want me to read the draft resolution of approval? Okay. All right, if we go to page 3, I'm just going to read because it's in bold here. Actually, before I read this, I have to take a step back. I'll offer a motion that we reaffirm SECRA from March 6, 2013. Do I have a second?
I second it.
I'll take Robert this time, how's that? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we reaffirmed. Now I can read them. Okay, so on page 3, On April 17, 2019, the Planning Board reaffirmed its March 6, 2013 secret findings statement. A public hearing was held on this application on April 17, 2019, when it was closed. So if we jump to page 5, resolution of approval, specific conditions. Number 1, all applicable conditions attached to the site plan, special permit, and architectural review board approvals from 1997 to the present for Chelsea GCA Realty Partnership LP/CPG Partners LP, in parentheses, also referred to in the same as Woodbury Common Premium Outlets, end parens, and any subsequent amendments thereto are hereby incorporated into this resolution and are to remain in full force and effect. And this approval is subject to and conditioned upon satisfaction of those conditions as if they were set forth at length herein. 2, this special permit shall be subject to annual renewal by the Planning Board, beginning 1 year from the issuance of the initial certificate of occupancy issued in connection with this special permit. The Village of Woodbury Building Department shall inspect the premises on an annual basis prior to the expiration of each renewed term of the special permit. Should the Building Department find the applicant in material compliance with the provisions of the special permit, then, in parentheses, provided that no other significant complaint or irregularity has come to the attention of the Planning Board, end parentheses, renewal of the special permit by the Planning Board shall, in each subsequent year, be automatic and shall be accomplished without the need for a public hearing. Should any material and continuing noncompliance be found by the Building Department, or should any significant complaint or irregularity have come to the attention of the Planning Board, which has not been remedied to the reasonable satisfaction of the Building Department or Planning Board, as the case may be, within a reasonable period of time after the noncompliance or complaint is brought to the attention of the applicant, and the matter shall be brought on for public hearing before the Planning Board, at which time said board shall rule upon the application for renewal of the special permit. 3, the applicant shall comply with the memorandum of the Village Planning Board engineer dated March 15, 2019, to the satisfaction of the Village Planning Board engineer. 4, this approval does not authorize the alteration of the exterior of any building and no outdoor construction. Any such alterations in construction requires the applicant to return to the Planning Board. 5, the applicant shall construct adequate barricades to separate construction zones from the public to the satisfaction of the Village Building Department. The applicant shall be responsible for following proper construction procedures and shall have responsibility for all public and worker protection. 6, the Village Building Inspector is hereby authorized to administer the applicant's use of existing approved GLA for temporary tenant storage when not otherwise leased to a storefront retailer, subject to the following, which shall be the responsibility of the applicant, not the tenant. A, tenant storage space, known as TSS, will be considered GLA and count towards the approved maximum GLA. B, a maximum of 15% of the GLA can be used as TSS. C, TSS is restricted to tenants of Woodbury Common. D, TSS shall meet all applicable building codes and requires a building occupancy permit. E, TSS requires its own address on the village's 9/11 map. F, all access to a TSS is restricted to service courts only.
This is where there were 2 changes.
Okay.
If I might. So number 7 would be revised to, all windows of tenant storage space shall be covered with a well-maintained Woodbury Common branded treatment, such that the space is not confused for a retail store with items for sale. So it's just rewording the same thing.
Okay. You're okay with that?
Yes.
Board members?
Yes?
That was number 7.
Yes, and number 8, based on Gary's interpretation, we think it should remain. This is the one for you to discuss about the sharing of tenant storage.
Okay. Number 8 reads, Woodbury Common tenants shall be prohibited from sharing tenant storage space. I know this is not what the applicant wants, but at this time, to go forward, we have to be in agreement with our building inspector, and if you so desire, I guess, to change it, I guess you can go speak with him or seek a ZBA, or you subdivide and you do what you do with the building department. At this point, at least this gives you, I think there's, what, 3 spaces that you're showing?
Well, the way it's worded, it's unlimited, but up to 15% of our square footage. Without having talked to Gary about this and hearing his concerns, I really have no point to comment. I guess, would perhaps the board consider not even mentioning any restriction, and that's something that we can deal directly with the building inspector as we would on everything else regarding the occupancy of these spaces?
I mean, to make number 8 match 6B with a maximum of 15% GLA, I can always state that it could be a single tenant per storage space, and then it would match. I mean, at this point, if the board members are approving this, we're allowing you to have 15% for the TSS with the GLA. I mean, that's something, I mean, if the board approves this, we're allowing you to go forward and having the tenant storage space, but then you would have to take it on with Gary to see how you can change his mind and what regulations are needed.
I think it's, the applicant can always speak to Gary, and I think it's a matter of enforcement. I don't think it's a matter of anything else. I think he's been concerned about storage, so if they can satisfy him that this can be handled in a manner that wouldn't create a problem for him and security, or whatever it might be, that's up to them. But if you want to act tonight, I would suggest, that you consider acting in accordance with Gary's recommendations. And it was things that we brought up at the last meeting, so you could discuss and have consideration as to whether it's appropriate. You've heard from your building inspector. There's nothing that prevents the applicant from talking to him further.
And there's nothing that prevents him from coming back should, it
To amend-
work out well this way.
To amend this, right? Board members, you have anything to say, Robert?
I agree with the council on that.
Okay. Sandy?
Does the applicant have to agree with this?
No.
Okay.
It's
I mean,
their application, it's your conclusions.
Right.
And accept it the way
We can approve it.
changes.
We can approve it with number 8 staying as is, and they can only be a single tenant. And if the applicant doesn't like it, they can talk to Gary, then he can always come back to us for an amendment to change that. If it's a rather large space, they would have to prove to Gary, and then they can come back, and that'd be an amendment, which wouldn't take much time to look at. Rich? Any comment?
I'd like to stay with it as no change.
We can vote on this and say yes to the draft resolution, John, or we can deny it. We're good.
Proceed.
Okay. I'm just trying to,
It's proceed.
okay. With the changes that were made in this, do I have a motion to accept?
Make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda is Silverstein Corporate Drive, continuation of public hearing for site plan approval, special permit and ARB for an office building and parking lot to include landscaping. Said property is located at 14 Corporate Drive in Central Valley and is known in the Village and Route tax maps as Section 226, Block 1, Lot 88. Just give me a moment to get my files together. Okay. For the record, on April 5th, we received the ARB that was requested. And Kelly, your office received a copy of that, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that was included in the amended resolution that I sent.
Okay, perfect. So where we left off last meeting. Hi.
Hi, good
Go.
evening. Jason Pittengaro, Pittengaro and Doach. We're here representing the applicant tonight, Zipporah Silverstein, for 14 Corporate Drive. As you mentioned, we've been here previously, presented plans. Last month, or actually 2 weeks ago, we opened the public hearing and we presented the architecturals and some materials and whatnot. Came to light that there was some paperwork missing from our file, which we supplied, I believe, the next day. And besides that, we've not made any further changes to the plan that we've presented tonight. We're aware that there's some requirements to comply with the planning and engineering comments that are still outstanding, which we will, of course, do. But other than that, nothing further to add tonight.
Okay, thank you. Did we see the colors?
We saw them last time.
We saw them last time.
I don't
so we're-
believe there's anybody from the public here, but they're available if anybody's interested in seeing.
Okay. Board members' thoughts or concerns before I go to Dennis and Kelly? Dennis, we're good. We were just waiting for the ARB.
Yes, you had a hearing on this, you received comments from the public, and you were just missing a form that you needed last time. They've submitted that now, so I think it'd be appropriate to have that ARB discussion, make sure that's what you need.
Okay. Kelly?
I have nothing further. We provided a draft resolution. It's a continuation of a public hearing, and we can do the resolution when that's complete.
Okay. Sandy, I'll start with you. Anything?
Really nothing for the applicant, but during the public hearing, the gentleman that spoke, I think he was a little confused, but I think by the end of the meeting, he.
Oh, Todd? Yes,
Yeah.
we went over the map and the way it was
he had
worded.
thought it
Yeah.
was changed, but nothing to change. Okay, I just wanted to make sure he was.
Yeah, Mr. Binder, yes. I spoke with him after the meeting, and he didn't realize, the way the notice was written, he thought it was a change to the original approval, so he's,
Yeah, we did speak to him afterwards as well.
so he understands
He
that.
seems satisfied. Okay.
Rich, anything?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Rob? I'm just going to ask the gentleman to take a step
Sure
back in
thing.
case someone does want to speak for a moment. Being this is a public hearing for this application, which we continue to keep open, anyone in the second row? Third row? Fourth row? Anyone along the side of the perimeter of the room? Anyone else wants to come forward? With no one coming forward, the pleasure of the board with the hearing.
Make the motion, we close the public hearing.
Have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jason, you can come back up. Thank you. Pleasure of the board. Do you want me to read the resolution, the draft amended resolution of approval for site plan special permit and architectural review board for Silverstein?
Yes.
You okay if I go forward, Jason?
Am I? Yes, we received a copy of the resolution a
You
few
did
days
receive?
ago from Kelly, and we've gone through it.
Perfect. On page 3, public hearing. Public hearing on this application was convened on April 3rd, 2019, and continued on April 17th when it was closed. We're going to go into page 5, specific conditions. Number 1, this approval shall be conditioned upon compliance with all conditions contained within the decisions of the Village of Woodbury Zoning Board of Appeals dated July 22nd, 1998. 2, all conditions of prior approvals in connection with this property shall continue to be in full force and effect, and this resolution does not supersede or otherwise modify such prior approvals and conditions except as specifically set forth in this resolution. 3, no building permit shall be issued authorizing the construction of or renovation of structures inconsistent with the architectural renderings submitted to and approved by the Architectural Review Board as part of this approval. Nor shall any certificate of occupancy be issued for any structures constructed except in conformance with such renderings. Any deviation from such renderings will require further planning board review. 4, All light levels must be limited to 0.1 foot candles at the property line, so no off-site glare will result. The fixture shall meet IDA, LED, or green globes criteria for nighttime friendly or dark sky lighting. Any wall pack fixtures shall include non-glare shields. 5, snow storage shall be maintained in a safe and orderly condition in an area or areas that does not cause nuisance or pavement icing on or off-site. 6, prior to signing of the plans by the chairwoman, the applicant shall comply with the memorandum of the planning board's planner dated February 15, 2019, to the satisfaction of the planning board's planner. 7, prior to the signing of the plans by the chairwoman, the applicant shall comply with the memorandum of the village engineer dated February 1st, 2019, to the satisfaction of the village engineer. 8, the basement of the building shall be used solely for storage by the tenants of the building. It cannot be finished or appear in any manner to be able to be occupied by any use other than storage. 9, this special permit shall be subject to annual renewal by the planning board. The Village of Woodbury Building Department shall inspect the premises during the year after approval of the special permit. On or about each anniversary date of this special permit, the building inspector shall submit a report to the planning board if he identifies any violations or complaints arising from construction of this project. If the building inspector submits such a report, the applicant shall appear before the planning board at a scheduled public hearing to address any such violations and/or complaints prior to renewal of the special permit. The village building department shall thereafter continue to inspect the premises on an annual basis prior to the expiration of each renewed term of the special permit to confirm compliance. If no violations or complaints are noted by the building inspector in any year, then the applicant's appearance and the need for a public hearing is waived for subsequent years in which no violation/complaint report is filed by the building inspector, and the special permit renewal is automatic. However, if there's any significant complaint or irregularity that comes to the attention of the building department or planning board in between the annual special permit renewal dates, which has not been remedied within a reasonable period of time after the non-compliance or complaint is brought to the attention of the applicant, then the matter shall be brought on by the building inspector for a public hearing before the planning board, at which time said board shall rule upon the need to deny or modify the special permit. Talk about a run-on sentence. It's okay.
Legalese, right?
It's okay. I'm used to them by now. You okay with this?
We're okay, it's in standard Woodbury conditions.
Okay. Board members, any thoughts, concerns? Do I have a motion to accept this draft, this resolution of approval?
I'll make that.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you, have a good night.
Next item is Solar Liberty, public hearing for site plan amendment to include placement of rooftop solar panels at the Life Storage Building. Said property is located at 97 Mar Lane and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 225, Block 1, Lot 40. Just give me a moment. For the record, on March 29th, we received a GML response from the Orange County Department of Planning. On March 19th, we received a couple of different reports from Solar Liberty. One of them was from the New York State Parks and their report. Would you like to give us a brief overview?
Yes, my name is Joe Vigneron. I'm with Solar Liberty. I'm a superintendent for them in construction. A brief overview of the installation is Life Storage is looking to put 280 solar panels on a rooftop. It's one of their flat roofs, or a lightly pitched, I believe it's a 310 pitch or 312 pitch. They'll be attached to the standing seam roof, and no penetrations will be made. Direct connection into the building, and they will probably be a net metering system, which means if they do overproduce, it will go feedback to the grid. Does anyone have any questions on solar? Are you familiar with solar installations, or do you have many in this town?
Well, we're going to go to our consultant,
Okay.
and then we'll go to the board members, so
Sure.
just bear with me for a second.
Okay.
Dennis,
Well, we haven't written a new report on this. We did report on it last time. The only thing that happened at the last meeting, as I recall, or the question that you had at the last meeting, was whether the ESOs would be comfortable with the installation, whether clearance distances were appropriate. The building department wrote to the ESOs twice. They did receive a response from the police department saying that it poses no problem for the police department. They have no issues with the project. It should have no negative impact on patrol functioning during and after construction. And that was from the police department. We have not heard from any of the other ESOs, but they were contacted twice.
Thank you. Kelly?
Like with the prior application, I have no further comments, but I did provide you with a draft resolution of approval.
Thank you. Robert, questions?
No, I looked at the resolution, and it seems to get rid of the things that I was concerned with.
Sandy, I guess you want us to hear from the public, or do you want to speak?
I just had a question. I remember, and I can't find it. Chris had had a comment about spacing.
Yes. That was one of the issues that we wanted the ESOs to look at. And in the email that I sent to Maria, which she passed on to the ESOs, it said specifically that the board was concerned about in the roof where there was the 8-foot separation of the panels was sufficient for their needs. And obviously the police department didn't think so. And we didn't hear from any of the others.
Okay.
I don't think ambulance would be a problem, but fire department didn't respond negatively.
Okay.
I'm good.
You good? You said Joe, right?
Yes,
I'm just going to ask you to take a step back, see if anyone from the audience wants to speak.
absolutely.
Being that this is a public hearing, did I read the notice? Did I read this?
I don't know.
This is my fourth one. Notice is hereby given that the Village of Woodbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing at 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday, April 17, 2019, at Woodbury Village Hall, 455 Route 32, Highland Mills, New York, in the matter of the application by Solar Liberty Energy Systems, Inc. for a site plan amendment to include placement of rooftop solar panels at the Life Storage Building. Said property is located at 97 Mar Lane and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 225, Block 1, Lot 40. Anyone in the second row that would like to speak on this application? Third row? Fourth row? Anyone in the building on this application with Solar Liberty? With that being said, what's the pleasure of the board with the public hearing?
Close it. Make a motion to close it.
All right, I'll second. All in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Dennis, can you just let Mr. Binder know that the hearing is closed?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Binder might be here for that Silverstein. Could you just let him know about the hearing that was all closed?
Oh, okay.
Would you mind doing that for me? Thank you. Before we go into the resolution, when you redo this map, oh, you can go back to the podium. The hearing's closed.
Yes.
When you redo the map, you need to take the Middletown map off and put one for Woodbury.
A Woodbury one?
Yeah, the Woodbury location map on the bottom corner.
Okay.
And I think that was, we talked about that last time. There was nothing else, yeah, what do we call it? The location map, the location site map. If you can take the Middletown one out, put one for Woodbury.
Very good.
All right?
Will do.
Did you get a copy of the draft resolution of approval?
He did not, because I didn't know who to send it to, but
Okay. We have an extra copy?
he can use Dennis's.
Okay.
Just make sure there's no notes on there. Hold on. Oh, wait, there's notes on there.
There's notes on that?
You can use mine.
Sorry. Oh, he did have an extra. See, I knew there was more.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to read the draft resolution of approval, and if you have any questions, just stop me at any time.
Okay.
All right? So this is the draft resolution of approval for site plan for Solar Liberty Energy Systems, Inc. Going to go to page 3. I'm going to stop for a moment. I will offer a motion to declare this a type 2 action. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing. A public hearing on this application was convened on April 17th when it was closed. Secret on April 17, 2019, the Planning Board classified the action as a Type 2 action requiring no further environmental review. We're going to go to page 4. Specific conditions. Prior to signing of the plans, the applicant shall comply with the memorandum of the village engineer dated February 15, 2019, to the satisfaction of the village engineer. 2, prior to the signing of the plans, the applicant shall confirm with the village building department that the application does not present any unreasonable safety risks, including but not limited to weight load, wind resistance, and ingress and egress in the event of fire or other emergency. 3, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, all electrical connections must be inspected by electrical underwriter, village code enforcement officer, and/or by an appropriate electrical inspection person or agency as determined by the village. 4, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall provide the building department with confirmation and results of the inspection of the connection to the public utility grid performed by the appropriate public utility. 5, prior to the signing of the plans, the applicant shall revise the plans to include an installation detail for the bollards if still proposed, and specifications/details for the proposed wall-mounted equipment if still proposed. 6, prior to the signing of the plans, the applicant shall revise the location plan on the cover sheet to reflect the location of the proposed improvement. 7, this solar Voltaic, thank you, system is required to be maintained in good working order. If the system ceases to perform its original intended.
It's, I took it, that specific statement from your code, so it's quoted, the originally intended function.
Okay, for more than 12 consecutive months, the property owner shall remove the collectors, mounts, and associated equipment and facilities by no later than 90 calendar days after the end of the 12-month period, unless the equipment poses a safety hazard or is an eyesore, in which circumstance removal must be performed within 30 days. To secure such maintenance and/or removal, the developer shall post a cash bond with the village in an amount to be established by the village board upon recommendation from the engineer. The cash bond amount will equal 150% of the decommissioning and reclamation costs for the entire system. The bond must remain valid until the decommissioning obligations have been met, and therefore must be renewed or replaced if/when needed, and account for any changes to the total decommissioning costs. This bond shall be reviewed for such revisions every 5 years. 8, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant must provide to the building department a stamped opinion from a New York State licensed structural engineer that the building on which the solar facility is located is structurally appropriate or has been reinforced to be appropriate for the solar facility proposed to be installed.
Has that been satisfied? I believe I have that document if you like.
Well, we won't take it
You don't
tonight,
need
so
Okay.
when you do all that. Are
Okay.
you okay with everything that I read so far?
Yes,
Okay.
agreed.
Board members, any thoughts or concerns of what I read? Consultants, you're okay with what I read? With all that being said, do I have a motion to accept this resolution of approval for the site plan?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Have a good night.
Board, thank you very much for your
You're
time.
welcome.
Have a good evening.
Next item on the agenda is Weiss/Apple Hill, discuss ARB review of a proposed single-family home located at 26 Apple Hill Drive in Highland Mills. This property is designated as a critical environmental area pursuant to SECRA and subject to the village regulations for ridge preservation 310-13. Said property is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 204, Block 2, Lot 2. Just give me a second. Okay. Applicant, hi.
Hi, good evening. For the record, my name is Joel Mann from Brachman Associates. I believe I will not it's not necessary to repeat the explanation and the request in detail from the last month. I will just summarize and add a couple details. I think it's important for the board. First, I will address the deed, was raised, the deed restrictions, what raised the last month. I have actually a copy of the deeds here. I don't know if the board has it. There's a list of restrictions, and we have an email, it's supposed to be an email from the attorney, Jay Myro, to Rick Golden about it, that all the restrictions are actually in effect, because on the chain of title, the restrictions are coming up, but for some reason, he didn't explain to me why it was removed from the last deed, but it was no intention to hide something, and you can read all the restrictions. You can see that it's not applying to any, not affecting anything with that application. In fact, actually, it says that the minimum square footage of the house should be 3,500. It's not, it's not putting a maximum, it's putting a minimum. So, it said that we probably need advice from the attorney what we should do, if we should have this filed again and have a copy to the board, or it's good as it is.
Your light is on.
Is it on? Okay, I haven't particularly seen that letter. However, Mr. Myro is correct that because these deed restrictions were within the chain of title, they do carry forward now. The only thing I would say is that the deed restriction talks about how there's a minimum square footage of 3,500 for each dwelling structure, but in the ARB resolution, the attachment had the smallest home design as 3,100 square feet and up to 4,850. So just noting that as that was in the attachment. But back to the letter, I haven't seen it, but I think it would be good to submit it to the board just so that the board has it for their file.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now, going back to the issues what was raised last month with the respect to the square feet of that house. Now looking into the ARB guidelines, there's four criteria what need to be matched for the dissimilarity. Basically, you have the cubical contents as it was raised by Dennis in the last couple of meetings. There is the gross floor area, there's the height of the building or height of roof, and there's other significant design features. Now, for this four items, and basically the board can use one of the four or part or two of it, whatever, to make the decision if this is okay or it's too much dissimilar to disapprove this. Now, regarding the height, we are exactly at the same height or even lower, because the fact is that that building is actually more, the front of the building, as discussed the last meeting, is basically fully buried. For the basement is fully buried, and there is only one floor above it. Then we have the attic, and we used, like, the second floor, what's being called the second floor on the plan, was basically like an open attic area. Regard to the gross floor area, as we raised the house across the street, when you took the whole, the gross floor area means everything, finished, unfinished, and actually, in fact, is that house, the way it was built, it was approved as is, has like a first floor, then there is a basement, and then there is a big open area. Part of it is unfinished, but when you took all the measurements, I don't have the final, because you just raised that. I didn't have access to the full set of plans or to the house as of now, but it seems that basically the footprint of the house is around 4,400. So we have the basement and the first floor, you come to a total of 8,800, and then you have the attic area. That's where I will need to calculate or get this information, but it's definitely over 1,000 square feet due to the roof pitch, what was actually part of the design, how the board likes that type of houses. So, being said that, there is another point about the cubical content, what was raised last month, that if we what is behind that, the cubical content. Basically, we understand that the point is that this is the mess of the building, what is out of the ground. So if we count, in using that calculation, what the part of the building, what is out of the ground, It was very hard to calculate that. I just got this information today. It comes out that the 13 Apple building is the last current proposal. What we have is just 13% more for the cubicle content. So basically, the 13 Apple building is 115,000 cubicle, and we have proposed 130,000 cubicle. So that means that that it's very close, and like we believe that the board is ready to go for a small increase in that.
Could you repeat that again? That's different than what you gave us at the last meeting, right?
Correct, yes. I just picked up that information that the way to calculate what the part from the cubicle content is out of the ground. So
what are you saying the numbers are again?
basically that the above ground cubicle content is not like the 196,000 what I'm proposing. It's in fact, it will only be 130,000.
130?
Yes, and the same thing, you're looking on the 13 Apple building, the full cubicle content is like as the last meeting you have the 126,000, but out of the above ground is 115,000. So it's basically just 20,000 cubicle is underground. And the difference by our building will be that we will have like 66,000 underground due to the slope of the site and the design of the building. So I will ask the board to take that in consideration for making that decision, and hopefully that will accommodate the needs as we are coming from a large size house and we cut it down as proposed.
Okay. Dennis? Dennis, any?
Well, the only thing new that you were asked to review was the table that was provided by the applicant last meeting. And that table provides information on floor areas and on cubicle content. It's the first material that you really received on cubicle content because that started to become the focus of your consideration, noting that a lot of the floor area inside wasn't being finished, so it really wasn't giving you a comparison of the mass of the building versus the other masses of buildings there. They compared, in the table that they provide you, they compared the application that they originally submitted and the last application, and then they talked about a current proposal, which they really didn't give us, but they told us they were going to give you something, but they didn't want to give it to you unless you advised them that that was something you might consider as an approval. That's what I understood.
Yes, or whatever, a different number.
All right, so the last submission that you received actually for a building and that you looked at, they have 110%, but that's 110% greater. So that means that building is twice the size of the largest building across the street, and I think the applicant agreed that that is the largest other building around. So it was 210% of that. I think that maybe they recognized that fairly large. So the one that they labeled current proposal that they haven't given you is they were prepared to give you something that had a cubicle content of 155% of the largest building. And I think they're asking the board whether in fact that is something that you would entertain, or if you still think, or if you do think at all, that either or both of those are fall into the category of excessive dissimilarity and would not be approved. They don't want to go through a paper exercise, spending money to submit a plan, which on its face the board would consider too dissimilar. At least, hopefully, I'm paraphrasing that correctly, and that's what the applicant's looking for.
Correct.
I can't comment on the figures that I just heard for the first time on a new computation about out of ground. We'd have to take a look at that. And even this one here, I think the applicant tried to give an honest portrayal of the buildings that they've shown you. Because quite frankly, if they're telling you that the last submission is twice the size of the building across the street, I think that sounds about right from what we looked at in the field, from what my feeling was from seeing that plan and looking at the other building across the street. As you remember, when we went to the field visit, we had the corners of the building staked out, and you could see the mass of that building. The building across the street is a pretty good sized building. It's a large structure. But the mass of the building that they were proposing, its footprint at least, is significant and was bigger. And that's borne out by the numbers. So I guess that's the question that's before the board now. If you consider those, either one or both of those proposals of the applicant to be too dissimilar for the neighborhood in accordance with your ARB criteria, then you should advise them now, and then they can determine what, maybe some further guidance as to what percentage would be considered reasonable above what's there.
To me, it seems dissimilar. If it was equal to the house across the street, I'd be more comfortable with that. So you're saying it's 155% bigger?
The one that they say that they will trim it down to, that they haven't given you yet, but what they could propose to you, they've called it current proposal, that would be 155% cubicle content of the building that exists now at 13 Apple Hill. No, just a different way of calculating it.
Well, I would feel better if it was equal to the house next door as far as size.
I think when we had discussed this before, when we had done the percentages, I too believe it's excessively dissimilar. I know through the years, it seems like each phase has been increased somewhat. But I would think 10% over the largest would be sufficient.
So if we're saying that the 13 Apple Hill total building footprint is at 44 and 26, you're saying an additional, you're saying 48, 50? Like you said, is this before?
Yeah, close, I think it's kind of close to 5,000.
It's different.
Get different results.
I know.
Much more.
There's, we're just talking over here, there's one other thing too. Previously in applications, you generally didn't gravitate towards the cubicle content criteria. You went to square footage because when they built the box, they built it out complete with full floors in all levels, mostly in all levels, and that's what you thought you were looking at. This is the first one that became quite apparent that comparison of square foot alone wasn't giving you a feel for the structure, and that's why you started looking at cubicle content. I think that that it's good to consider this. I think in future we might have to do the same thing, review them all perhaps and ask for cubicle content and square footage so that you can get a good feel for the structure, the mass, and whether it's dissimilar in the neighborhood.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The cubicle content, we're including the basement?
Basically, yes. It's the whole. It's from the slab all the way up to the roof. But actually, like I added previously, that I believe that the cubicle content will only be part of the building what is out of the ground, what is much smaller what I proposed previously. I have actually a new calculation of that if the board want to see that. And that will probably need to be determined if that's the way it's going to be considered.
It's a hard calculation because your structure, for example, has an exposed basement level for half of it almost, and not for the other half. So how do you carve that up into considering what's out of the ground and what's not in the ground? So
basically, we're using the grade line, and that's basically cutting the building like with an angle. Depends based on the percentage. It's a similar way we're counting for building code for height. You're using an average, and that makes the same average. And I have actually some photos like with how it's being sliced, and you can probably visualize that a little bit more if I can hand to the board something.
What I'm trying to get at is I'm
Yeah.
looking at each floor level, and when they get to the second floor, it's mostly the height from below, that there's only just a little bit of the loft area where the attic is. I understand that.
It's basically the difference between 13 Apple has a closed attic. This is just going to be like an open attic area. So you're going to be like a large opening. Correct.
concerns of the way this house, the side of this house, I'm just throwing it out there. Because to be quite honest with you, I'm looking at these maps, I know the numbers everyone's, concerned about, cubicle feet. We've never looked at cubicle feet content before. I don't want to start now until we have something in place going for next applicant. That's been bugging me, that we're looking at cubicle content for this application, but we've never done it before.
Well, I think it just gives you a better idea of the massive difference there is between
Right.
13 Apple Hill and,
The way it was starting us with everyone off is across the street is 110 length. This is 20 feet longer.
Correct.
Which, if you look at it, it's basically, it's the garage and the back room, which is, it says playroom and.
Correct.
So it's longer that way. Could you swing it behind, I don't know, to make it narrower instead of 120 feet, I don't know.
We can probably make the house not that long and keep it more in the back of the house if that makes it better. But
Oh, sorry.
I'm just trying to come up with something that's equitable between the board.
No, no,
and
and
the applicant. How can we condense this to make it smaller?
I would think, the answer to your question would be yes, I'm sure we could redesign the house to make it narrower, which was part of what we were going to propose regardless. I understand the introduction of the cubicle content as, potentially another factor to assess the situation. Every one of the factors is flawed. Square footage obviously has a flaw. Cubicle contents has a simple flaw that I've brought up before. If my basement is 9 feet tall or 12 feet tall, drastically changes the cubicle content calculation without changing the public perception of the structure. I dug in the ground 3 feet more. So I understand its value, but I think, I'm not a proponent of having it be the headliner here.
A normal dining room is 8, 9 feet. You've only 12 feet.
Right, we have 12 feet in the dining room, and a lot of the design was driven by that entry and that he wanted that balcony look, even though he did not want a second floor. So it's, there's a couple things here that are atypical, no question.
So when you go to the cubicle content, where do you stop with a height from a ceiling, from a floor to ceiling? Do we go to 8, 10, 12? I mean, where do we stop when there's, no one's living there? From 4 feet above the ceiling height? And to me, I'm having trouble.
Well, no, I agree, and,
with all this.
and also I think that a numerical analysis, it gives you some things to try and compare, but I think it begins to stray away from the assessment of the physical house that you're viewing from a public place as to whether it's significantly dissimilar or excessively similar to another house. We're sitting here looking at what's essentially a ranch that has some high one-story spaces versus the house across the street that we've been comparing it to that is a 2-story house fully out of the ground. So which roof is taller? Which you're seeing different structures. From where I've been, I'm not of the mindset that they're excessively dissimilar from a public viewing. The house is less than a 2-car garage wider than the house across the street. I can make it narrower. I can find a way to do that. But in assessing the square footage, it's an unknown from a public viewing. You don't know if that house is 20 feet deep or 100 feet deep, and I don't see the.
but on what you gave us, and maybe I'm just not reading it right, on the total building footprint. So if you're looking down from the sky, the footprint, that's the footprint, correct?
correct.
Yeah, so you're talking about 2,000, I believe this is square feet, right?
Yes, the
So
footprint.
you're talking about 2,000 square feet larger than the next largest house.
I will address that too, because the reason you can see that the first floor is smaller. The reason the basement is bigger, we just use, every house has a deck. And when you look on the top, like from the sky, you can see the house and the deck. This, we are just filling in we're increasing the basement under the deck. So in fact, it's not making the house look bigger from the sky, because you see the deck, you don't see the bigger basement. If you want to go, if that's the question.
Because if you look where the kitchen is, kitchen over where the garage is and where the playroom is, if you took that portion out of the equation of the basement, and you just put the basement in from the entry and over, I mean, it might make a difference with this, with the building footprint. If the footprint is in your basement, that's where, because the basement square feet, if you look at it, the basement is 6417.
Well, that's the one you haven't seen yet. That's what they're proposing. The basement in the one you've seen is 8,440.
But it is unexcavated areas there, so I'm just trying to present something to the board, the applicant, I'm trying to come up with something, because we gotta come up with something here. And to be honest with you, at this point, if the garage is put to the back of the house and made the building not as narrow, they put it behind where the dining room is, or and the playroom, maybe that might help us in the length of the building, it would match across the street. I don't know how you feel about that. Rich, your thoughts?
I'm in agreement with Robert and Sandy at this point. Whether you're talking about cubicle content, square footage, the size of this house is very huge, and to me, it's excessive, dissimilar. It's been a standing practice of this planning board to approve up to 10% increase based on the merits of the application. I would approve a max of 10% on the largest home, which is across the street, provided that now, the house across the street, we're talking about, if I look at Gary's sheet there, that's 4426 without the basement, if I read this correctly? We're talking about a finished area, correct? Finished. Let's be on the same plane. Are we talking about finished when we talk about total square feet?
I think the square footage that Gary gave us, I thought was, but I'm not sure.
Well, I'm reading the column.
This one here is saying this is the first floor footprint.
That's the footprint of the building is 4426.
I want to stay with Gary's document. It says finished. Am I wrong in the column above?
I'll tell you in a minute.
Yeah.
Which house number?
The one across the
Doesn't
street.
matter, it's the heading.
Yeah, look at the column.
Gary's heading says finished floor area.
Right, so I want to stay with that terminology, finished. So I would go 10% with the finished area.
Sandy's saying 15, bring it up. Yours would be under 5,000, Sandy's saying 5,000.
Well, I'm just saying 10% of that figure.
Now, on Gary's numbers, if you look at the one that says, it includes a finished basement, so I'm going to use that argument right there. We increased it from 35 to 49. That's more than 10%.
That's with the basement.
That was in a basement.
Let's,
This has a basement, but it's not finished.
well, let's talk about apples and apples. If we're talking about the basement, let's include the basement. If we're not, let's exclude it.
Okay, so 13, the house across the street. It's at 4479. That was a 25% increase of over the 3558. We approved, this board approved the 25% increase in size. You want to go back to 10. It's been varying what we approve, and all these different builders have come in to put up in those homes up there.
Yeah, and again, what's happening, it's getting larger and larger. And then the next one's going to come in for 25% over this one.
But we opened up the door already.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Tonight, you're asking, what do we think? And I'm willing to go to 10%.
Well, I'm not in agreement with any of you right now at this table. I can't, I'm just, this development, this is what, 3 acres? How many acres do we deal with this property, 3 acres or 2 acres?
I don't remember. think
It's two acre lots, yes.
Yeah.
These homes that are up there on Apple Hill, they vary 2 acres, some of them have a little larger than 3 acres. All those homes that have been built up there, maybe 4 or 5 of them are from the original approval.
If that.
I've been in the city here, we've had different builders come in, and they've all changed the square footage, so we kept the same. But there's the homes that are out on Scunny Monk. If you look at them, they're all, it's in an area that's not, to me, is, if I want to build a house that I want, and it fits within the setbacks and everything, and it's only gonna have 2 bedrooms, there's restrictions we can put on this. Finished basement, they have to come back before the board, it has to be the 3-car garage, they can't make it into a room unless they come back before the planning board. They want to increase the septic system, they have to come back before the planning board. And if legally we could do that and not go before the building department, then we could take another look at this. But I'm just having a very hard time with all of this, and I don't know, this applicant has been back and forth before. We have to give them something tonight to go with, because we have to make a decision by next meeting. And if we don't make a decision by next meeting, they're going to get the original.
Well, we
Well, not
would
original,
talk to
they're-
them about extending that time frame so that there would be no default of anything.
That's if they agree to
And if
us.
they don't, and the board doesn't agree, then you can deny it. You don't have to approve what was
So
asked
we need to
for.
come up with something, and the applicant has been agreeable coming back and changing all these plans. So, I mean, give them something, what do you want them to do?
Well, just to give you a sense of the numbers, if the Apple Hill is 4479, and if you add the 10% that Rich talked about, you would be at 4926. The applicant has asked for 5,311 in the plan they haven't presented to you. That's the one that they said they would go to. And that would be an 18.5% increase, okay? So you're not worlds apart, but I mean, that's the difference in the numbers that you have.
Wait, this is the first time I'm hearing it this way. What, 5,300, did you say?
The applicant has a current proposal, which you haven't seen on their table, all right? Well, no, they were saying in the, well, you're asking, they're asking to go to a number, you're trying to decide on what number. I'm just telling you that what they've said is they would go to this one, and their square foot on the first floor, this isn't cubicle contents, this is square foot on the first floor, is 5,311 square feet, okay? That's what they're saying they would present to you. They didn't want to go through the paper exercise of producing a plan only to have it denied for being dissimilar. So they asking, was that satisfactory? You're talking about a number somewhat less, so it's probably a valuable conversation. So the number that you had mentioned, 4926 is what Rich talked about. That's 10% more than that other at Apple Hill.
Robert? I was gonna say, reduce the size of the basement, you already mentioned. I think that's satisfactory. Relocate the garage and go into the building somehow. Condense it a bit.
Okay, let's go to Sandy.
I need to figure something out first.
So Rich, you're saying, let's just say 5,000 for numbers here, and they're saying 53. That's considerably less than the 6,400. They're reducing it by 1,100 square feet. And 18.5% is considerably less than the other 2 approvals that we've done in that development, whether they did have a finished basement or not. And legality, legally, what I stated before, if we could do that, then they would have to come back before the board for any changes to the garage, the basement. I mean, can we put those stipulations?
You
in the
can
resolution?
require them to return to the planning board, however, it's gonna be difficult as an enforcement issue to find out if something like that has happened for Gary to then say, now you need to return to the planning board. So that.
But if they want to go to the plan, if whatever home we approve, and they wanted to change it, they would have to go to Gary for a permit, but we would say, no, you have to come back before us.
We would put it in the resolution.
We would put that in the resolution, okay. Rich, thoughts? We're talking from 10% to 18.5% to 25 to 40.
Well, I'm hearing also that reduce the size of the basement, change the garage to the back. And Robert, I didn't hear a size from you. All I heard was the garage in the basement. I didn't hear the size of the house.
I didn't say the
He didn't say one yet.
exact size, but as Maria mentioned, part of the foundation on slab and a reduction in the basement area. But I don't have a number.
All right.
What you think you didn't hear said? Sandy said 15% before. What
No, I said 10.
She said 10, Rick said 10, which would bring it up to just under 5,000. So we're talking about 300 square feet right now with a number.
Well, I think I voiced this concern before in that, okay, so if you go 18% now, and we said there's 6 building lots left. So if you apply that 18 or more,
Then we'll hold the other lots to 18%.
by,
Going forward, we would hold any other lot, any building that came in with the remaining lots, there aren't too many, there's 6 of them left, I believe. This is the 7th one, right?
How many to start?
Doesn't matter.
Well,
I think it was 19. I think there's like, it should be about 12 homes built already. Thereabouts, roughly.
about. But the first approval was in 2004. So we're sitting here 15 years later with, 30% of the lot still open.
Yeah. And they're actually going to pay taxes for each square footage. They're making it bigger. It's not like,
I mean, I think some consideration should, well, the similar, dissimilar, there's more to it than just size, in my opinion. There's roof pitches, there's heights, there's window proportions, there's rhythms, there's colors, there's all kinds of stuff, which I thought we did a fair job of trying to adhere to the neighborhood. So I would say all those things kind of fall into the not excessively dissimilar category. And also, I understand your concern. I'm thinking maybe the market's changing though, and what was approved 15 years ago may not be what's in demand, is what seems to be the case. So I wouldn't be surprised if what you're predicting is what will be.
There was 19 lots, 12 of them have been built. Rich, do you have any, I mean,
Yeah, again,
I guess Rich and Robert would like that to reduce the basement
and the garage in the back.
and move the garage to the back.
And,
Yeah, I'm not surely the garage, but something will,
Something
yeah.
needs to be
yeah,
now.
it's somewhere around 5,000. It's more than 10%. Again, we're setting a precedent every time an application comes up on the subdivision.
Sandy?
yeah, I like the idea of those changes because it does reduce the length and what you're seeing. Now, Barry, you talked about you've adhered to a lot of things